How should we preach the gospel? Let's find out together. Hello everyone, this is David Sami and you are watching A Christian Journey. On this channel, we talk about theology, philosophy, culture, and everything that pertains to Christian life. This is a two-part series on the subject of how should we preach the gospel. As our culture becomes more and more secular, should we change our message and approach, or should we remain the same? There are many Christian leaders who believe we need to reinvent Christianity in order to reach out to the new generation. Biblical Christianity does not appeal to this generation. Going through the Bible doesn't work today. We need to create an alternative Christianity in order to reach out to this generation. Some of the beliefs and practices of Christianity come across as legalistic and are no longer acceptable to the culture. Is this true? Do we need to alter our message in order to reach the new generation? Or should we remain consistent with biblical beliefs and values in spite of our culture departure from them? This is the question before us. I thought maybe a good place to start is to look to the past and see if there are some lessons for us to consider. During the period of Enlightenment in 1800, the ideas centered on reason. The Enlightenment emphasized reason, skepticism, and individualism, which in turn posed a challenge to the traditional religious views. As Enlightenment ideas began more entrenched in the society, more and more denominations, they begin to reason that for Christianity to be acceptable, it needs to become reasonable. And we need to get rid of its mythology. And what they meant and identified as mythology was all the miracles, virgin birth, the story of creation, and so forth. They came to the conclusion that these miraculous acts are no longer reasonable to accept. As a result, Christianity would be best served by getting rid of these myths and stories. This in turn gave birth to 19th century liberalism and liberal theology, which advocated social, ethical, and humanitarian concern. The ideas of becoming right with God, becoming born again, was overshadowed. But how did this remaking of Christianity work out for those mainline denominations? All we have to do is to attend one of those churches who took this approach, and our answer becomes apparent. The churches that are experiencing the most numeric growth are the ones that took the opposite approach by remaining faithful to the traditional Christian beliefs and ideas. The question is, are we making the same mistake today as we did in the 18th century? Today we live in a multicultural, affluent society which is heavily influenced by secular humanism. In light of the direction that our society is going, how far should we go in altering our message and beliefs in order to become relevant to the new generation? I want to give you 3 examples of trends that are gaining popularity, especially among the young pastors. The first trend is the idea of becoming more socially active and trying to transform the world and bring about social change on planet Earth. This approach was popularized by Rick Warren and the purpose-driven movement. He proposes to bring about social change on planet Earth by working together to eradicate AIDS, illiteracy, and so on. I think there is nothing wrong with trying to reach out to our communities and the world at large, as long as it is built on the foundation of godliness and discipleship. But this social activism should never reinvent the purpose of the church and what it does. The purpose of the church collectively is to preach the gospel and make disciples of all nations. This needs to be the foundation that all social good works should be built upon. But we should never commit an exchange where we would replace the gospel for social activism. The second trend is to try to help people experience God and to find their destiny and purpose. These pastors believe that the biblical Christianity is too legalistic, so we need to create an alternative that is safe, positive, and something that would help people to reach their potential. The approach that most of these pastors would take is more like a life coach than a Christian pastor. Some of the themes that we may find in these type of churches would be like, we are not religious but spiritual. We want to provide a safe place for everyone where they could come and feel loved. We know that most of you have been hurt by the church. We just want to love you and help you to become the best version of yourself. In these type of fellowships, we will find encouraging and positive messages that would make us feel good and motivate us to pursue our visions and dreams. I think there is a place for some of these ideas. But the goal of Christianity is for the believers to obey Christ and become more like Him. In Matthew 28:19 we read, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." In verse 20 we read, "Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you." In Galatians 4:19 we read, "My little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you." Unfortunately, in these type of fellowships, we will not hear much about Christian beliefs and ideals. These type of ministries is tailored to help people to find success in this life with human potential movement principle. The concern here is not much conformity to the likeness of Christ. As long as you are happy and feel encouraged, we have done our job. I used to know a gentleman who attended a fellowship like this. He told me he would never go to a church that's going to make him feel bad. And if he ever leaves a church feeling bad, he will never go back. Example number 3. We are increasingly living in a multicultural society where we have people with different backgrounds and beliefs. What is becoming increasingly offensive is the idea that Jesus is the only way to God. I personally have watched some high-profile pastors being interviewed on TV where the host asked these pastors, if you have to believe in Christ in order to go to heaven. Not one of these pastors would affirm this statement. They would go on to say, only God knows what is in people's heart, and they couldn't say who would go to heaven or not. One popular young pastor was being interviewed by Oprah, and she asked the question if he believed that Jesus was the only way to God. This pastor went on to say that Jesus points the way to God. Then Oprah said, then he's not the only way to God. And this pastor said, no. Why would a young prominent pastor deny what is clearly stated in the New Testament by none other than Jesus himself? Simply because it is no longer acceptable in our society to say that Jesus is the only way to God. In this example, we see how the culture influences us to modify and revise our theology in order to be acceptable to the culture. In Mark 8:38, Jesus says, "For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with holy angels." In light of these three examples, what is the common denominator among these three examples? They all are trying to make Christianity appeal to the people. The message of the gospel is being tailored to the values of our society in order to be acceptable by the masses. What impact would this kind of approach have on our churches as a whole? I would leave that question with you to ponder on. Now, on our next video, we want to see how can we preach the gospel in such a way that would be God-honoring and fulfilling his purposes. Until next time, may the Lord be with you. May he watch over you and give you peace. This is David Sami with A Christian Journey.